Watches and Wonders 2019. It's good to see everybody here, some familiar faces, some new faces. And we're here to do HODINKEE Radio Live. And we have a pretty special guest here. We have Mr. Greg Robb, the co-founder of Design Miami and the Design District, the CEO of Dacra, and kind of the man who made this all happen. And we also have James Stacy, our senior writer here. And I'm your host, Stephen Pulvirent, and this is HODINKEE Radio Live. So thanks for coming. So, like I said, I see some familiar faces and some new faces. We have kind of a mix of locals and people who came to Miami just for this. But you're a Miami guy, born and raised, right?
Born in Miami Beach. Is the mic working? No. Not really. I was born in Miami Beach.
And so you grew up in the real estate world here, right?
Yes, my father was in real estate.
Okay. And when did you realize that was something you wanted to do also?
Can everyone hear me? No.
Can we get a little more volume on that mic?
Testing.
Oh.
Now? Testing. Is that better? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
So, real estate. I was in law school. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Didn't know if I wanted to become an art dealer or go into real estate. Art seemed impractical. Real estate seemed boring. And then I discovered South Beach. At the time, there wasn't much there, but I kind of saw those Art Deco buildings as sculptures, and so it was a good merger of my art interest and my real estate interest.
Okay, and what was the scene like in Miami at the time? I mean, it was very different than what it's like now.
So the whole South Beach area, the Art Deco district, was basically a dwindling retirement village for World War II immigrants that had come to the United States, worked in factories, and retired on Social Security. There was also kind of a crack epidemic, so it was basically a dwindling elderly population and kind of homeless crack addicts. Okay,
so a little bit different than what it's like now.
When I told my mom that I had bought and was moving into the Webster Hotel on 12th and Collins, she cried.
What's are we getting? Yeah, we're gonna swap mics out here.
I got upgraded. No.
Are we
testing? Wow.
Hey, there we are.
All right, there we go. We have sound.
Good. You didn't want to hear the first part. It was boring.
So how did you go about changing things? I mean, that's not an easy kind of hole to dig out of. What was that process like?
Well, I bought the first property and I needed to get a tenant. There were no tenants in South Beach at the time, no businesses. Businesses that kind of catered to those retired elderly people. And the first property I bought was on 5th and Washington. It's a pretty central corner in South Beach, and figured I got to get someone to rent this place. There was actually one tenant. There was this guy who would go behind my building and he would acquire all the tin cans from the homeless people. So we had one commercial operation in South Beach at the time. And miraculously, the first person that I was able to convince to come and open a store was Keith Haring. And he opened a variation of his pop shop.
And then when did things really start to kind of like take off? Like when did you realize that maybe this wasn't like a little project here, a little project there, but something that could be more like a movement?
There were a couple of moments. The Cameo Theater had opened and it became a music hall, and I saw this concert with Alpha Blondie playing there, and immediately like I could feel that something was happening. This was in the late 80s. I started in 87. In about 1990, 91, I can't remember the exact date, Chris Blackwell and I opened the Marlin Hotel. And to me, that was like the big turning point. It was a 12-room hotel. We had a Jamaican restaurant, of course, a recording studio, of course, a model agency. Chris had his apartment there. I was living next door in the Webster. and we had 12 hotel rooms, and we managed to fill it up for our opening with Naomi, Kate, and Christy flew in, the top models, and also this little unknown band called U2.
Yeah, I think I've maybe heard of them before.
They were the biggest rock band in the world at the time. I mean, they still probably are one, or if not the. And it was amazing. Like, that was the moment where it was clear that something incredible was happening in South Beach. It was really the energy that created and the interest globally. There were two huge magazines for travel at the time, Travel and Leisure and Traveler Condé Nast. And our little 12-room Marlin was the first hotel ever to be on the cover of both.
Oh, wow.
It was all because of Chris. Chris was a mentor, and he's the founder of Island Records, and obviously his presence and discovery of South Beach and fortunately collaboration with us was one of the catalysts that really turned it into an amazing place.
And for a property like that, which was obviously very successful, what characterized it as being better than what could have been its peers or competition?
Well, there really weren't like peers or competition. It's not that other things happened, but South Beach was like a rundown area with these unbelievable Art Deco buildings, but no new kind of inhabitants. And it first started like to become a destination for the catalog fashion world. So catalogs were produced there, and that's what we did before the Marlin with the Webster. It became like a production place. There was also a model agency there, film processing. They would do the layouts for the ads, and I lived there. And so you'd walk around, and there were just amazingly beautiful people on every corner of South Beach getting photographs taken. There was nobody else, and I'm not exaggerating. I mean, maybe you'd see like Klaus Oldenburg or Roy Lichtenstein walking down the street, or Calvin Klein, but other than that, it was retired elderly people, crack addicts, and no one else. And of course, it's a different kind of anchor. I know people like to think of Sears or J.C. Penney as an anchor, but we kind of had music and fashion.
And so what you did on South Beach, it's a little bit different than what you're doing here, but the design district is kind of the next chapter of taking a part of Miami that was maybe underused and doing something different and kind of vibrant with it, right?
Well, so in South Beach, I obviously began to focus on neighborhood revitalization. That's what it was. And in that process, we would always go to the next section. So it started off on Ocean Drive, and then Collins and Washington, and then we went south of Fifth Street, we went up to Espanola Way, eventually went to Lincoln Road. And each of those was like discovering the next neighborhood where we thought growth would happen. I mean, for those of you that know Miami, at this time, people didn't think that Lincoln Road was part of South Beach. They thought Lincoln Road was another neighborhood. And once we had gotten to Lincoln Road and started developing there, I realized that now it was time to go over the bridge. There was no place else for South Beach to grow. And so I started buying property in the design district. One of the things that frustrated me in South Beach and that I found really inspiring about the design district, while we were by far the largest property holder in the historical district, we owned like 5 or 10%. And when you own a small percentage like this, a lot of things can happen that you don't necessarily agree with. And so there were like, tacky bars that were opening and things that were incongruous with the vision that we had. And that's part of being in a neighborhood. And the design district was small enough and contained enough where we could own like a meaningful percentage. Today we own about 70% of the privately held property in the neighborhood. And by doing that, we could like have more influence on the direction. And so it was like, for me, the next Lincoln Road or the next Espanola Way, the next like part of this movement in Miami, which I saw South Beach as, but also an opportunity to really be in a contained area where we could have a bigger influence on driving the long-term direction.
And how would you describe that direction? Like, what do you see the design district being in 5-10 years?
Well, we've always had this kind of philosophy of integrating culture and commerce.